You know, that specific kind of desperation. The kind that tastes like stale coffee and copper pennies. The kind where your bank account is a single sad digit away from a flat line, and your landlord has started using your first name in his passive-aggressive reminder texts. That was me, 6 months ago. I was drowning. My master's in history was proving to be about as useful as a chocolate teapot, and I was one missed bill away from moving back into my childhood bedroom, a fate I considered worse than death. Then I saw it, a small, unassuming ad in the digital classifieds, sandwiched between a listing for a used lawnmower and an MLM scheme peddling essential oils. Archivist needed, Old City Library, night shift, competitive pay, inquire within. The Old City Library. It wasn't just a library, it was a landmark, a hulking beast of Gothic and neoclassical architecture that squatted in the oldest part of the city, looking more like a cathedral dedicated to forgotten gods than a place for public reading. I'd been inside once as a kid and remember being overwhelmed by the sheer scale of it, the colossal ceilings and the oppressive silence that seemed to have a physical weight. Competitive pay for a night archivist. It screamed too good to be true, but desperation is a powerful motivator. It deafens you to the sound of alarm bells. So I polished my resume, put on my one good shirt, and went to inquire within. The interview was the first red flag. The head librarian, a man named Alistair Blackwood, didn't conduct it in a sterile office. He met me in the main reading hall after closing. The place was a cavern of shadows, the only light coming from a single green-shaded lamp on a massive oak desk. Mr. Blackwood was ancient, a man made of paper dust and tweed. His skin was thin and translucent, stretched over sharp bones, and his eyes were like chips of obsidian. He barely glanced at my resume. He didn't ask about my cataloging experience or my knowledge of the Dewey Decimal System. His questions were odd. "Do you have a strong constitution, son?" he asked, his voice a dry rustle. "I suppose so, sir. I don't get sick often." "That's not what I meant," he said, fixing me with a stare that felt 100 years deep. "Are you a man who follows instructions to the letter, without question?" "Yes, sir, absolutely." Desperation makes you agreeable, even if those instructions seem illogical, pointless, even peculiar. "A rule is a rule, sir." He gave a slow, creaking nod, a smile that didn't touch his eyes. "You'll do. The position is yours if you want it. Your work will be exclusively in the sub-archives from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. You will be the only one here. The solitude is significant. Can you handle that?" The thought of being alone in that colossal tomb-like building was unnerving, but the number he quoted for the salary silenced any protest my nerves might have offered. It was more than competitive. It was life-changing. "I can handle it," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. And just like that, I was the new night archivist for the Old City Library. My first shift was the following night. I remember walking up the grand stone steps, the heavy oak doors closing behind me with a boom that echoed like a coffin lid slamming shut. The silence I'd remembered was 10 times heavier at night. It was a living thing. Mr. Blackwood was waiting for me. He didn't give me a tour. He didn't show me the staff coffee machine. He just led me down a spiraling iron staircase into the archives. The air grew colder, thick with the smell of decay. Not a rotten smell, but the dry, sweet scent of slowly disintegrating paper and leather. The sub-archives were a labyrinth of floor-to-ceiling metal shelves crammed so tightly together that it felt claustrophobic. He led me to a small, functional desk with a computer that looked like it had survived Y2K. On the desk was a single laminated sheet of paper. "Your duties are simple," Mr. Blackwood said, his voice a low whisper that the shelves seemed to drink up. "You will receive digital requests for document retrieval. You find them, scan them, and upload them. But your primary duty, your most important duty, is to follow these." He tapped a long, bony finger on the laminated sheet. "Memorize them. Live by them. Your predecessor failed to appreciate their importance. Do not make the same mistake." He turned and left without another word, his footsteps fading up the iron stairs, leaving me alone in the heart of the library's deep, dark silence. I picked up the sheet. The title was printed in a stark, blocky font. "Rules for the Night Archivist," I scoffed. It felt like a hazing ritual, some weird prank to play on the new guy. Then I started to read. 1. Upon the clock striking 10 p.m., you must confirm that every external door and window on the ground floor is locked. Do not assume they are. Check each one yourself. They are not trying to get out. They are trying to get in. A little dramatic, but okay. Standard security stuff. 2. The sub-basement is accessible via the iron door at the far end of Aisle Z. This area is designated Folio Omega. The door is to remain locked. Do not attempt to open it. Do not listen to any sounds that may come from it. We have lost the key. A bit more specific, a bit weirder. Why mention sounds? 3. Between the hours of 1 a.m. and 1:15 a.m., you may hear whispering from the rare books and antiquities section directly above the archives. It may sound like multiple voices, all speaking at once. Do not investigate. Do not try to make out the words. They are simply rehearsing. My skepticism began to curdle into a cold knot in my stomach. Rehearsing for what? 4. At approximately 2:30 a.m., a young girl in a pale dress may approach your desk. She will ask for a book on human anatomy. You are to politely inform her that all volumes are currently checked out. Under no circumstances are you to look her directly in the eyes for more than 3 seconds. Her name is not Lily, no matter what she says. Okay, nope. This was full-blown insane. I actually laughed, a short, sharp bark of a sound that was immediately swallowed by the oppressive quiet. This had to be a joke. 5. If the lights in the archives begin to flicker in a steady, rhythmic pulse, 3 short, 3 long, 3 short, immediately cease your work. Proceed directly to the staff break room on this level, lock the door, and turn off the lights. Do not make a sound until the low humming ceases. The librarian is doing his rounds. The quotation marks around librarian made my skin crawl. 6. At precisely 3:33 a.m., a single, untitled book, bound in black leather, will manifest on the corner of your desk. Do not open it. Do not touch it with your bare skin. Use the provided iron tongs to carry it to the boiler room furnace. It must be incinerated before 3:45 a.m. Ensure the ashes are cold before dawn. Manifest. Just appear out of thin air. I looked around and saw a pair of heavy, rust-colored iron tongs hanging from a hook on the wall. My blood ran cold. 7. If at any point you see a man who appears to be your perfect duplicate, do not engage with him. He is a correction. Observe his reflection in any polished surface. It will be subtly wrong, smiling when he is not, blinking out of sync. This means he has found a flaw in the catalogue, or in you. Close your eyes, count backwards from 100 aloud, and pray you have performed your duties flawlessly. Do not open your eyes until you are certain he is gone. 8. Should the old rotary phone on the main circulation desk ring after 4 a.m., do not answer it. No matter how many times it rings, it is not for you. The silence on the other end is attentive. 9. The first ray of dawn striking the stained glass window in the grand reading hall is your signal. Your work is done. Leave immediately. Do not linger to tidy up. The day shift can handle it. The sun is your only true sanctuary. I put the list down, my hands trembling slightly. This was elaborate. Too elaborate for a prank. The sheer specificity of it all, the tongs on the wall, the mention of the rotary phone I'd seen upstairs. A seed of genuine fear began to sprout in the pit of my stomach. But the money, I reminded myself. The life-changing money. I could handle some old building noises and a weird list of rules. I was a rational, educated man. There were logical explanations for everything. I spent the first 3 hours in a state of nervous productivity. I found a few requested documents, scanned them, and tried to ignore the suffocating silence and the way every tiny sound, the hum of the computer, the scuttling of what I prayed was a mouse, was amplified into something monstrous. Then the clock on my computer screen ticked over to 1 a.m. and the whispering started. It wasn't the wind. It was coming from the ceiling, from the direction of the rare books section, just like the rule said. It wasn't one voice, but dozens, maybe hundreds. A soft, sibilant cascade of whispers, overlapping and intertwining, impossible to understand, but undeniably human. It sounded like a crowd in a vast auditorium, all murmuring to each other at once. They are simply rehearsing. The line from the rules echoed in my head. My heart hammered against my ribs. I froze, every muscle tensed, straining to listen against my better judgment. I couldn't make out a single word, but the cadence was conversational, rhythmic. It rose and fell like a tide of secrets. At exactly 1:15 a.m., it stopped, not faded out. It just cut off, as if a switch had been flipped, plunging the archives back into profound silence. The absence of the sound was somehow more terrifying than the sound itself. I was shaking. I told myself it was the building's ancient ventilation system, that my tired mind was playing tricks on me. A logical explanation, but I didn't believe it. I worked with frantic, nervous energy until about 2:25 a.m. I was so engrossed in a particularly fragile 19th century city ledger that I didn't hear her approach. I just suddenly felt a drop in temperature, a pocket of icy air by my shoulder. I looked up. She was standing right there. A little girl, no older than 8 or 9, wearing a simple, high-collared dress that looked like it was made a century ago. Her skin was the color of milk, her hair a stark black bob, but her eyes were too big for her face, dark and deep and utterly devoid of any childish light. "Excuse me," she said, her voice a thin, reedy whisper. "I'm looking for a book." My blood turned to ice water. Rule number 4 slammed into the forefront of my mind. "A book on human anatomy," she finished, her gaze fixed on me. I could feel the force of her stare, and it took every ounce of my willpower to tear my own eyes away and look at the dusty computer monitor. 3 seconds. Do not look her in the eyes for more than 3 seconds. I'm sorry," I stammered, my voice cracking. "All of our anatomy volumes are currently checked out." She was silent for a long moment. I risked a glance. She hadn't moved. A small, sad smile touched her lips. "That's what the last man said," she whispered. "My name is Lily. Are you sure you can't help Lily? Her name is not Lily." "I'm positive," I said, my voice barely audible. I'm so sorry." I stared resolutely at my desk, at the grain of the cheap wood, at a coffee stain from a previous occupant. I could feel her presence, a palpable coldness, a vortex of sorrow and wrongness. After what felt like an eternity, the cold spot vanished. I dared to look up. She was gone. Not a sound of footsteps, nothing. Just vanished into the stacks. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding and collapsed back in my chair, my body drenched in a cold sweat. The night was no longer a joke. The rules weren't a prank. They were a survival manual. Just before 3 a.m. it happened. The lights flickered, once, twice, then they began to pulse. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. SOSS. It was a damn SOS pattern. Rule 5. The librarian is doing his rounds. A sound started, low and resonant, a hum. It wasn't electrical. It vibrated through the concrete floor, up the legs of my chair, and into my bones. It was deep, organic, and it was getting louder. I didn't hesitate. I scrambled from my chair, nearly tripping over my own feet, and fled towards the back of the archives where I'd seen the sign for the staff break room. The humming grew in volume, a bass thrum that made my teeth ache. I fumbled with the knob, threw myself inside the small, windowless room, and slammed the heavy door shut, twisting the lock. I flicked off the light and plunged myself into absolute darkness, my back pressed against the door, my ears straining. Outside, I heard footsteps. They weren't human. They were heavy, impossibly heavy, yet soft. A wet, dragging shuffle. Schlump, schlump, schlump. The sound of something immense and boneless moving through the aisles. The humming was deafening now, a physical pressure against the door. I could smell something, a scent seeping under the door. The smell of stagnant pond water, wet soil, and something acrid, like ozone. The shuffling stopped right outside my door. The humming intensified, vibrating the very air in the tiny room. I clamped my hands over my mouth to stifle a scream. I was certain it knew I was in there, certain the door would splinter and this librarian would pour into the room. Then, as slowly as it began, the humming receded. The shuffling footsteps dragged themselves away, growing fainter and fainter until they were gone. I stayed there in the dark for a long time, trembling uncontrollably, until the silence felt safe again. I checked the time on my phone's dim screen. 3:28 a.m. My heart sank. Rule 6. I crept out of the break room, my legs like jelly, and made my way back to my desk. And there it was. Sitting on the corner where there had been nothing before was a book. It was about the size of a thick journal, bound in plain, stark black leather. No title, no markings, nothing. It just sat there, seeming to absorb the light around it, a patch of pure darkness in the dim archive. It looked ancient and evil. Do not touch it with your bare skin. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely unhook the iron tongs from the wall. They felt heavy, clumsy. As I approached the desk, I could feel a strange energy coming off the book, a faint vibration, a hum at the very edge of hearing. The air around it was cold. Clumsily, I managed to grip the book with the tongs. It was heavier than it had any right to be, a dead, dense weight. I held it out away from my body, as if it were radioactive, and started the long walk to the boiler room. Every shadow seemed to leap and twist. Every creak of the old building was a monster at my back. The boiler room was a brick-lined pit of hell, dominated by a massive cast iron furnace that looked like it hadn't been used in 50 years. I wrenched the heavy furnace door open with a groan of protesting metal. A wave of stale, hot air washed over me. With a final prayer to a God I hadn't spoken to in years, I shoved the book inside. It landed on the dusty grate with a soft thud. I ignited the pilot light, and with a whoosh, the gas jets roared to life, filling the furnace with blue and orange flames. I watched through the small glass porthole, expecting the book to catch fire immediately. It didn't. The flames licked at the black leather, caressing it, but for a full minute, it just sat there, untouched. Then, the leather began to bubble and smoke. But the smoke was wrong. It was a greasy, greenish-black color, and a sound began to emanate from the fire. Not the crackle of burning paper, but a high, thin screaming, like thousands of voices crying out in agony. The sound drilled into my skull. I slammed the furnace door shut, but I could still hear it, muffled but clear. The clock was ticking. 3:43 a.m. I had to wait. The screaming finally subsided, replaced by the normal roar of the furnace. When I finally left the boiler room, sweat stinging my eyes, the clock read 3:46 a.m. I had made it, barely. I was walking back down the main aisle, my nerves completely shot, feeling like I'd aged a decade in one night. And that's when I saw him. He was standing at my desk. It was me, perfectly me. Same frayed jeans, same grey hoodie, same tired expression. He was just standing there, idly straightening a stack of papers I had left crooked. My heart stopped. I mean it. It literally stopped for a second before kicking back into a frantic, painful rhythm. Rule 7. The correction. I ducked behind a towering shelf, my body moving on pure instinct. Peeking through a gap between two thick tomes on metallurgy, I stared at my double. He moved with my mannerisms, but they were too precise, too clean. There was no wasted motion. He turned his head slightly, and I saw his reflection in the dark screen of my computer monitor. The face in the reflection was grinning, a wide, predatory, tooth-filled grin that stretched from ear to ear. But the man, the thing, standing at my desk, had a perfectly neutral, placid expression. My blood froze in my veins. He has found a flaw in the catalogue, or in you. The correction tilted its head, and its gaze swept the archives. I felt its eyes pass over my hiding spot, and for a terrifying second, I thought it had seen me. It took a step away from the desk and murmured, its voice a perfect imitation of my own, but cold, devoid of all emotion. Minor chronological error in the 1924 municipal ledgers. Sloppy. I shrank back, squeezing my eyes shut. Close your eyes, count backwards from 100 aloud. 100, I whispered, my voice a choked, trembling thing. 99, 98. I could hear its footsteps, my footsteps, moving softly down an adjacent aisle. Was it looking for me, or was it leaving? I didn't dare open my eyes. 97, 96, brrring. The sound was so loud, so violently out of place in the silence, that I screamed. A short, strangled yelp. It was the phone. The old rotary phone upstairs on the main circulation desk. Ringing and ringing and ringing. My watch had buzzed. It was 4:02 a.m., Rule 8. My eyes were still screwed shut. 74, 73. I continued counting, my voice breaking. The ringing was relentless, drilling into my brain. The urge to run upstairs and answer it, just to make the noise stop, was a physical pain. But the memory of the rule, and the terror of the correction who might still be out there, kept me pinned to the spot. 51, 50, the ringing continued. The silence on the other end is attentive. What did that even mean? Was something listening to the phone not being answered? Was it listening to me, hiding and counting and losing my mind? 23, 22. The footsteps of my double had stopped. The only sounds in the entire world were my pathetic whispered counting and that hellish, incessant ringing. 3, 2, 1. I finished. I held my breath, listening. The ringing continued for another 10 seconds, then stopped abruptly. The silence that rushed back in was deeper, heavier, more profound than before. I stayed there, eyes closed, for another full minute, then another. Slowly, cautiously, I opened them. The aisle was empty. I peeked out from behind the shelf. My desk was empty. The correction was gone. I didn't go back to the desk. I couldn't. I retreated to the relative safety of the break room and sat on the floor in the dark, waiting. I watched the crack under the door for what felt like years, waiting for the first hint of light. And then I saw it. A thin, pale line of grey. Dawn. I have never, in my entire life, felt a sense of relief so pure and absolute. It was like being pulled from underwater just as my lungs were about to burst. I didn't wait. I didn't grab my coat. I just walked, then jogged, then ran up the iron staircase, through the shadowy main hall where a single, glorious beam of sunlight cut through a high stained glass window, a spear of gold in the dusty dark. I fumbled with the locks on the main door and burst out into the cool morning air, gasping like a newborn. I should have quit. Any sane person would have run and never looked back. But the desperation that led me there in the first place hadn't gone away. The rent was still due. The world outside the library was just as scary, in its own mundane way. So I went back the next night, and the night after that. I'm writing this down. I don't know why. As a warning, I guess. I've been working here for 6 months now. The terror has faded, replaced by a kind of dull procedural dread. I follow the rules. I'm efficient. The whispers are just background noise. The little girl is an annoyance. The librarian's rounds are a mandatory coffee break. I burn the black book every night without a second thought. I've only seen the correction one other time. It was standing by the microfilm readers. Its reflection in the glass was weeping, but its face was calm. It glanced at me, nodded once, and vanished. I still don't know what that meant. A good report card? The job has changed me. I feel older. I'm jumpy during the day, and I can't stand silence. But the truly scary part isn't the monsters or the ghosts. It's that I'm getting used to it, that this has become my normal. Mr. Blackwood gave me a small raise last week. He said I was the best archivist they've had in decades. He said my work was impeccably corrected. I just try not to think about what that implies. I don't think about my predecessor or the one before him. I just do my job, check the locks, ignore the whispers, and burn the book. The sun is setting. My shift is about to start. I just need to do one last thing before I go. I have to stand in front of the mirror for a few minutes. I have to make sure that when I smile, my reflection smiles with me. So far, it always has. But every night, I'm terrified it's the night it won't.